Did you know that Dobby was the one who found the Room of Requirement, not Neville? And even crazier, Dobby used the room to hide a drunk house elf. Yeah, if you've only watched the movies or if it's been a while since you've read the books, then you're in for a treat. My name is Gibby, and welcome back to episode 69 of Movies vs. Manuscripts Harry Potter Edition. This is Factor Fantasy Harry Potter, a channel dedicated to all things wizarding. And if you're new here, this is the show where I take the books page by page and compare them to the films scene by scene to find all the differences. If you watched my last episode, then you know that this one is kind of a continuation of that one because I simply couldn't fit all the changes into one video. But today we're going through chapter 18 of the Order of the Phoenix, called Dumbledore's Army, and comparing it to the scenes in the book where they find the Room of Requirement, start their secret DADA classes, and resist Umbridge's tyranny. Per usual, I'll cover all the changes across the four major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But first, let's recap what we see in the movie, that way it's fresh on our mind when we're comparing it to the book. And this week, it's pretty easy because what we see is just a montage of the DA meeting over the course of 2 months. We're not going to get into their Christmas break just yet, but we'll just be covering this period in between, which the movie condenses to a quick sequence that shows us Neville finding the Room of Requirement, Harry starting his teaching, Umbridge forming her inquisitorial squad, and multiple close calls of them almost getting caught. All while Umbridge is posting educational decree after educational decree. And that's pretty much it. So with that quick refresher out of the way, let's dive into our first three categories of characters, timeline, and location. First up for characters, we're missing some of our professors like Sprout and Flitwick. We also don't get some of our usual antics from Peeves, who is seen less and less as these books progress, but I still wish he was included in the movies. Additionally, Angelina Johnson gets the short end of the stick since Quidditch was removed. If you didn't know, she got named Quidditch captain after Oliver Wood left, so she has some parts in this book where she's organizing the team or doing practices, but all that got cut from the movie, of course. Then finally, and most importantly, the movies remove Dobby. This is a real loss in my opinion, and it goes beyond just the Order of the Phoenix. This actually is the second time that Dobby has gotten snubbed by Neville, because in book 4, it's actually Dobby who gives Harry gillyweed for the second task, not Neville. But anyway, we'll see how crucial his help is in this chapter when we go through the plot changes. Moving on to timeline, there isn't much to say. Technically, they do condense about 2 months of information into a quick montage, but it isn't as severe of a change as removing it entirely. Regardless of how fast-paced it is, they do show us what happens, even if it's incorrect information, but that's something to discuss in the plot section. Before we can get there though, we need to name our few locations that we don't see, which are the Quidditch pitch, Charms class, the greenhouses, and the Great Hall. I think logistically for a film, it's just easier to keep using the same sets over and over again instead of showing every location the book discusses. I can see how expensive it would be to rebuild a set only to show it for like 5 seconds. So I don't entirely blame them for some of these locations being missing. Anyway, before we dive into our plot changes, I want to shout out Audible, which has always been a great partner of the channel. If you enjoy these videos and want to relive these experiences for yourself, then check out the link below to claim your free trial of Audible, which lets you get your first audiobook for free, so you can claim the Order of the Phoenix and follow along with me as I do this series. Plus, every free trial supports the channel at the same time. And speaking of supporting the channel, I want to give a big shout out to Joshua, Timothy, RoboSteve, Maha, and the rest of my incredible Patreon and YouTube members who help make these videos possible. Now with that being said, let's jump into chapter 18 and find all of the plot changes between the book and the movie. To kick off our plot changes, we're starting right at the beginning of chapter 18, which features a Charms class and a break period that the movie completely omits. The chapter opens with the 5th years practicing the silencing charm and Charms class on bullfrogs and ravens while it's heavily downpouring outside. It's actually right in the middle of this class that Hermione first brings up her growing suspicion that Umbridge is intercepting Harry's mail. She points to Hedwig's injured wing from the previous chapter and the close call they had with Sirius in the fire as proof that all their communication must be being watched. Of course, the class itself is pretty chaotic, and at one point, Ron accidentally jabs his bullfrog right in the eye. This causes the frog to croak deafeningly loudly, which earns both him and Harry some extra silencing homework from Professor Flitwick. After class, the trio heads into their break period, grabbing seats in an overcrowded first-floor study classroom where Peeves is just floating near the chandelier, shooting ink pellets at the students below. As they continue their stressful conversation about Umbridge, Angelina Johnson struggles through the crowded room to happily announce that the Gryffindor Quidditch team has finally been reinstated by Umbridge, and that they have a mandatory practice that very night. But the stress of it all really starts getting to Hermione, and she suddenly expresses some major second thoughts about starting their secret defense group. She tells Harry and Ron that she thinks Sirius is living vicariously through them, and that his reckless encouragement is just a projection of his own frustration about being cooped up in Grimmauld Place. But before the boys can really argue with her, their serious discussion is completely ruined when Peeves swoops down from the ceiling and empties an entire bottle of ink right over Katie Bell's head. Moving further into the evening, we have another major scene left on the cutting room floor, which is that reinstated Quidditch practice. Thanks to that heavy downpour of rain from earlier in the day, the Gryffindor team meets in the changing room in the middle of a howling storm. To make matters worse, Fred and George are visibly wincing with every single movement because they're covered in painful pus-filled boils caused by testing their own fever fudge. It's a funny moment because Harry says that he can't see any boils on their face or hands, and the twins look at him and pretty much say, "You don't want to know where they are." But anyway, even after Harry smartly taps his glasses to apply Hermione's impervious charm, they still have to endure a miserable hour of practice out in the freezing rain. But the real importance of this scene happens right after practice ends. Out of nowhere, Harry's scar suddenly sears with blinding pain. He explains to a worried Ron that he can actually feel that Voldemort is in a towering temper because something he once done isn't happening fast enough. This is a huge realization for Harry because it finally clicks that he isn't just seeing Voldemort's thoughts, he's actually sensing his direct emotions. He realizes that this is the exact same thing that happened when he was in detention with Umbridge. Voldemort was feeling incredibly happy, and when he was back in Grimmauld Place and Voldemort was furious. It's a massive piece of overarching plot for the entire book, but the movie completely skips over this crucial moment of connection. But now that brings us to our next change, which is the biggest one of this episode. After that miserable Quidditch practice, Harry heads back to the Gryffindor common room to try to catch up on his homework. He sits by the fire trying to write a torturous potions essay for Snape on the properties of scurvygrass, lovage, and sneezewort, but he ends up falling fast asleep in his chair. And I'm pretty sure that type of homework would put me to sleep too. As he sleeps, he falls into a very specific dream. One where he is running down a windowless corridor toward a plain black door at the Ministry of Magic. But before he can reach it in his dreams, he is suddenly jolted awake by none other than Dobby the house elf. Now, Dobby's entrance here is absolutely hilarious and so visually incredible that it's a crime they didn't put it in the film. When Harry wakes up, he sees Dobby wearing every single one of Hermione's knitted hats stacked perfectly on top of each other, making his head look about 2 or 3 feet elongated. And perched right on the topmost bauble of this ridiculous hat tower is a fully healed Hedwig, whom Dobby safely brought back from Professor Grubblyplank. As they get to talking, Dobby cheerfully reveals a major piece of Hogwarts behind-the-scenes drama. He explains that all the other Hogwarts house elves actually find Hermione's hidden knitted clothes deeply insulting. In fact, they're so offended by her attempts to trick them into freedom that they outright refuse to clean Gryffindor Tower. Because of this, Dobby is happily cleaning the entire tower completely by himself. Seeing his loyal friend, Harry decides to open up about his current struggles. He explains their massive dilemma with Umbridge and tells Dobby that they desperately need a secret room to practice defense magic where no one can find them. Without skipping a beat, Dobby immediately suggests the Room of Requirement, or as the house elves call it, the Come and Go Room. And by the way, that drunk house elf I mentioned at the beginning of the video is Winky. If you remember from the Goblet of Fire, there was a house elf named Winky who used to belong to Barty Crouch Sr. Once Barty Crouch fired Winky, and that's a long story, so check out my previous season of Movies vs. Manuscripts if you have questions. But anyway, after she got fired, she came to work at Hogwarts for Dumbledore, and she constantly got drunk on butterbeer. Dobby mentions that even months later, Winky is still drinking a little too much butterbeer, and the Room of Requirement is where he takes her when she's particularly drunk or hungover. He tells Harry exactly where it is on the 7th floor, across from the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, and explains the specific rule to enter. You have to walk past the massive blank wall, concentrating hard on exactly what it is that you need. This is a massive structural change from the movies. As you know from the film, Neville is the one who seemingly just stumbles upon the Room of Requirement when walking by it one day. The movies completely erase Dobby from this narrative, taking away yet another one of his heroic moments and giving it to Neville instead. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this is the exact same thing that they did in the Goblet of Fire when they had Neville give Harry the gillyweed instead of Dobby. This book moment is so crucial because it shows just how much Dobby cares for Harry, how integrated the house elves are in the secrets of Hogwarts, and how Harry's kindness to Dobby in the Chamber of Secrets continually pays off. Completely cutting Dobby out of this discovery and tossing it to Neville is easily one of the most frustrating changes in the entire adaptation. But anyway, once Harry actually brings this idea to Ron and Hermione at lunch, we get another great character detail that the movies completely reverse. If you remember the film, when they finally enter the Room of Requirement, Hermione starts spouting off how it works, just like it's a well-known Hogwarts fact that you can find in Hogwarts: A History. This is very typical of the movies, as they love to just make her know absolutely everything. But in the book, she has no idea what this room is. In fact, when Harry first explains Dobby's suggestion, she is highly skeptical. She quickly points out that Dobby's plans aren't always exactly safe, which is true, specifically reminding Harry of that time in their second year when Dobby's rogue bludger ended up losing Harry all the bones in his right arm. She remains completely doubtful about the whole thing until Harry finally mentions that Dumbledore himself actually talked about finding the secret room once when he desperately needed a bathroom. The very second Hermione hears that Dumbledore actually knows about the room, her expression completely clears and she drops all her objections, finally agreeing to give it a try. But no, she does not know what this room already is, like in the movie. Building right off that mention of Dumbledore, by the way, we get a fantastic little Easter egg and callback when Harry is pressing Dobby for more details about the room's limits. Harry specifically asks the house elf if, theoretically, someone really needed a bathroom, would the room fill itself with chamber pots? Dobby nods earnestly and simply replies, "Dobby expects so, sir." This is a brilliant direct callback all the way to chapter 23 of the Goblet of Fire, and I briefly mentioned it in the previous change there. If you remember, during the Yule Ball, Dumbledore casually tells the guest headmasters a story about taking a wrong turn at 4 in the morning when his bladder was especially full, only to discover a beautifully proportioned room completely filled with chamber pots. He noted that when he went back to look for it later, it had entirely vanished. It's such a clever bit of long-term world building and foreshadowing from the books that the movie completely misses out on, since they gave the room's discovery to Neville instead, and since they never showed that conversation back at the Yule Ball, which, to be honest, I'm fine with, because if they included that comment from Dumbledore in the movie, it would have made no sense at all. But moving past the discovery of the room and getting into the actual meetings, we need to address the movie montage. The film uses this quick montage as a good way to show the overall vibe of what's going on, but it is actually wildly historically inaccurate to the books. For example, the montage shows Umbridge forming her inquisitorial squad and includes multiple shots of Filch or Slytherins almost catching the students outside the room. But in reality, the inquisitorial squad isn't even established by Umbridge until chapter 28, 10 chapters from now, which is after the DA is fully caught and Dumbledore flees the school. Up until that point, they are never in any immediate danger of being caught in the corridors like the movie shows. Why? Well, because Harry is incredibly tactical and uses the Marauder's map. Before every single meeting, he pulls out the map to pinpoint exactly where Filch, Mrs. Norris, and Umbridge are inside the castle before giving everyone the all clear. And when the meetings end, he doesn't just let everyone walk out together. He dismisses the 28 members in staggered groups of 3 or 4, standing there and physically watching their little ink dots travel safely all the way back to their respective house dormitories. It's a great display of Harry's leadership and planning that the movie completely ignores. Now, to rewind just a bit to the start of that very first meeting when everyone is actually settling into the room, we get to see the official formation of the group, along with a hilarious bit of revenge that the movie left out. Hermione decides to formally hold a vote for their leader, and Cho Chang immediately nominates Harry, prompting every single person in the room, even a very reluctant Zacharias Smith, to raise their hand. Next, they need a safe name to use in the corridors. Cho suggests that they call themselves the Defense Association, or the DA for short. Ginny then brilliantly chimes in, suggesting that the initials DA should actually stand for Dumbledore's army, since that is exactly what the Ministry fears the most. Hermione loves the idea, writes it across the top of their signed list, and pins it to the wall. With the formalities out of the way, Harry decides to start their first lesson with the disarming charm. Naturally, Zachariah Smith aggressively rolls his eyes at this, scoffing that a simple disarming spell isn't going to do any good against Voldemort. But Harry completely shuts him down by quietly stating that he actually used that exact spell against Voldemort himself, and that it saved his life just a few months prior. It's a great mic drop moment, but the best part comes during the actual practice. Because Zachariah Smith was being so annoying, Fred and George decide to enact a little petty revenge. They stand right behind him and take turns repeatedly pointing their wands at his back, constantly blasting his wand out of his hand while he stands there completely confused as to why he's so terrible at the spell. I guess I could have included Zachariah Smith, Fred and George, and a few of these other people in the character changes, but the reason I didn't is because technically we do see them in these scenes. They just don't do the things that the book has them do. Anyway, while Fred and George are busy pranking Zacharias, we also get to see Ron and Hermione pair up for that disarming charm practice, which plays out quite differently than what we see on screen. In the film's quick montage, we actually see Ron and Hermione face off in a rather dramatic, stunning duel where Hermione powerfully blasts Ron backward. But in the book, stunning isn't even introduced to the group until chapter 21, right before the Christmas holidays. Instead, during their first lesson, they're just practicing basic Expelliarmus, and the results are pretty hilarious. As the trio walks safely back to the Gryffindor common room after the meeting, Ron and Hermione immediately start bickering about their performance. Ron proudly boasts that he actually managed to disarm Hermione during their practice. However, Hermione is incredibly quick to shoot his ego down, pointing out that she successfully disarmed him far more times, and that his single supposed success only happened because he literally tripped over his own feet and physically knocked the wand right out of her hand. This brings us perfectly to our next change for the episode, which is the actual amount of educational decrees we see. The movie's montage visually exaggerates this massively, ending with a whopping 136 decrees plastered practically everywhere you look. But the books paint a much more calculated picture of the Ministry's hostile takeover. In reality, there are only 8 specific educational decrees implemented during Umbridge's reign, specifically numbering 22 through 29. The previous 21 decrees were simply older, pre-existing ministry rules that had been enacted over the years. These 8 new decrees systematically break down the school structure, starting with Decree 22, which allows the ministry to appoint teachers, all the way up to Decree 29, which supposedly approves physical violence like whipping by the caretaker. It's a terrifyingly slow and deliberate dismantling of Hogwarts that the movie turns into a slightly comedic wall of paper, but the book handles it with a much more grounded and sinister approach. To be honest, I don't really care about how the movie did this because I think it's funny and it communicates what Umbridge was doing at the school. But no, there were not over 100 educational decrees posted within just a couple of months. Next, we have a plot change to discuss regarding the interrogations that we see during the movie montage. If you remember, the film shows a brief scene of students lined up outside of Umbridge's office waiting to be interrogated by her. But in the book, Umbridge doesn't interrogate the general student body like this at all. We've still got about 10 chapters to go before reaching this point, but the only person she actually interrogates in her office is Harry. This happens in chapter 28, right after she's been named headmistress. She immediately has Filch drag Harry up to her office and makes a major suspicious performance out of offering him a drink. As we'll cover in future episodes once we get to those chapters, we know that she spikes that tea with some Veritaserum, aka truth-telling potion. But that's getting ahead of ourselves, and for today's changes, all you need to know is that she didn't have dozens of students line up out of her office in order to be questioned. Oh, and another change that I'll kind of retroactively add in here is the fact that Filch doesn't get given candy that makes him have pus-filled boils. As we already discussed, that was Fred and George during their Quidditch practice because they were testing their own fever fudge. But that's probably the inspiration behind these massive pus-filled boils that we see on Filch. Stepping away from the skiving snack boxes and back into the actual DA lessons, there's an audible mistake that the movie makes regarding a very specific spell. If you listen closely during the film's montage, you can clearly hear students yelling the incantation Levi Corpus while practicing their own levitation magic. However, this is a massive timeline error for the overarching story. In the books, Harry doesn't even learn the word Levi Corpus until his 6th year in the Half-Blood Prince, when he finds it scribbled inside Snape's old advanced potion-making textbook. Even more importantly, the book specifically notes that this is a non-verbal spell. While Harry does technically see the spell's effect during the Order of the Phoenix, it doesn't happen until chapter 28 when he looks into the pensive and witnesses his father non-verbally hoisting a teenage Snape into the air by his ankle. The actual incantation is never once spoken aloud or learned by Harry during his 5th year. making its inclusion in the movie's DA meetings a pretty glaring continuity error. And now for our final change of this episode, we need to talk about that explosive ending to the movie's training montage. The film wraps up its sequence by highlighting Ginny Weasley casting a massively powerful Reducto spell that completely disintegrates a practice dummy. While it looks awesome on screen, this is actually another classic case of the movies taking a cool moment from a side character and giving it to one of the main cast members. In reality, we won't officially read about this until the start of chapter 19, but it's actually Parvati Patil who masters this spell so impressively. Harry specifically notes that Parvati produced such a good reductor curse that she completely reduced a table carrying all their dark detectors and sneakoscopes entirely to dust. While Ginny is certainly a powerful witch in her own right, her true signature spell throughout the books is actually her legendary Bat Bogey Hex, not the reductor curse. It's a shame Parvati didn't get her moment to shine on screen, but it does make for a pretty epic conclusion to the film's montage. And those are all of the changes between chapter 18 of the Order of the Phoenix and what the movie shows. So now that you've heard them all, what do you think was the best or worst change? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed and want to stay tuned for more Harry Potter related content, then make sure to like and subscribe. As always, remember that you are appreciated, you matter, and Jesus loves you. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.